Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. This is Perpetuality. I have here the newest release from Baltic Watches. This is the Prismic Stone Dial. Each of these watches will be limited to 200 pieces, and they're designed to be a tribute to their head offices around the world. This is actually for the London boutique, and they have the lapis lazuli for the Paris boutique, and as well as the natural jade for the New York boutique. I have here the red Agate dial to check out. Let's get into it. A quick glance at the watch and its design of the classic small seconds Calatrava style of dress watch that was prevalent from the 1940s all the way to the latter part of the 1950s, and even with that, it has hints of a saucer style case shape or disco volante, if you will. Mind you, the Baltic is slightly different with flatter flanks on the side of the case. It also reminds me of my Lecoultre wrist alarm from the 1950s. Which was my go-to dress watch over the years. I wore it rather infrequently due to the age and the fragility of the movement and dial. With that said, with modern dress watches like the Baltic, you don't have that issue. All that to be said, the Baltic has the grace and presence and elegance of dress watches of yesteryears. Now, the watch measures in at 36mm in diameter, lug width of 20mm, and a lug length of 44mm from the case tip to the bottom part of the case, and only 9.2mm thick, excluding the sapphire crystal, which makes the watch tremendously slender, and it will translate to comfort on the wrist, as you see here on my 6.4-inch wide wrist. Now, mind you, if you have a wrist larger than 7 inches, it might be too small for you. I'd gather that the appropriate wrist size for this watch on the small scale would be around 5.8 inches, all the way to the upper scale of maybe 6.7 to 6.8 inches. And if your wrist is larger than that, you may struggle as this watch will appear diminutive on you. The watch will come with either a Milanese style bracelet that's integrated to the watch or a leather strap. If you option it out on the bracelet, it will extend the lug-to-lug length closer to around 51-52mm. And that means that if you can see how it bows out on my wrist here, it will be a little bit uncomfortable for some individuals with a smaller wrist. I think this watch wears best on a leather strap. I have to commend Baltic for being courageous and doing something different. Introducing a stone dial on a dress watch is just a novel idea. It's a marriage of a perfectly unique material that has variations in it to a genre of watch where you're meant to be more relaxed. Take your time, reading the time, if you will. The indices are sharp, sword-tipped shaped, and they're beautifully appointed. You'll see under high magnification just how good the quality is up close. The Baltic printing under 4x magnification, extremely clean, devoid of any flaws that I can see with the naked eye, very sharp. And then combined with the fact that the indices seem to be high polished to a high degree of detail, it's almost like black polish to me. It catches the light ever so beautifully. I have to say I'm very impressed with Baltic has managed to pull off at this particular price point of this watch. Even the seconds hand is actually concave, sunken in, and then high polished on both edges to achieve a sharp dagger-like shape, which then we bring our eyes to that seconds track, also printed on the stone dial itself, uniquely done, very sharp, and spaced out adequately to draw attention to that 6 o'clock index, which is this diamond-shaped, double polished on each side marker that is such a unique way to differentiate both top and bottom of the dial for easier time reading. The hands have been beautifully finished. I'm saying they're brushed on the center, high polished on the outer edges, and the center post for the hands is capped off and also polished. Something you wouldn't see typically of watches around that under $2,000 range. You'd see them more so on higher end Japanese and Swiss made watches. We move on to talk about the case design and the elements that make up the case. It is a stainless steel construction married with a grade 5 titanium mid case. This is a sandwich design of sorts, as you can see here. The lugs themselves are made out of brushed stainless steel, but the center component of the case is grade 5 titanium. I would imagine that Baltic did this for not only surface differentiation, but to lighten out the watch and also And why not? I think it's a great material for a dress watch, especially if it's grade 5, where it's going to be durable and light. I think that it is something that's rare, given that grade 5 titanium is reserved for watches that cost far more than what this watch is asking for. I appreciate the variation in textures for this watch. The top part of the lugs are high polished, and there's a step bezel with an inner polished edge and the outer edges are brushed. The polished parts of the watch are extremely well done. I appreciate the drilled lug holes and the delicate lug design on this watch as well. Confession time, I'm usually not a big fan of Milanese style bracelets as I find them to be too flimsy on the wrist, and this is not the case for the one that's been supplied with the Baltic Prismic. The links are finely put together, there are no gaps between them, which means that it should not pull at the hairs on your wrist. It's also brushed on the outer extremities, which means that it's less likely to show marks of wear or show fingerprint oils for that matter. Opening up that one fold-out clasp, you'll see adjustment points on the back whereby you can get the desired fitment on your wrist, and I think this is a very thoughtful approach. It also closes rather easily with that buckle, and just also as a mark of convenience, Baltic has supplied quick release pins to remove the bracelet. It is a very flexible bracelet, but it does not feel flimsy, which is usually what I don't feel is the case for most Milanese style bracelets to begin with. The marriage of this bracelet to that Disco Volante Calatrava style of case design is an absolute throwback to the early 1950s to part of the 1960s. The back of the watch features a exhibition case back, which then houses the ETA 7001 movement, which has 42-hour power reserve and beats at 4 Hz. It is finished off with Geneva striping on the top plate of the bridges, and then a sunray brushing on both the hairspring and barrel. When we take a look closer at just the fine finishing of the bridges and the gear train, we can tell that Baltic has paid careful attention and appointment to the little details here. I can see that there's no traces of human hair or any marks of carelessness in the construction and assembly of this movement. Slowing down the movement, we get a nice little view of the pallet fork working its hardest behind the balance. The screws have also been blued, which is a nice touch, and I think that when you consider how this movement has been put together, it's a rather simple one at that, so any bit of embellishment goes a long way for visual appeal, especially when they've gone to the lengths of giving us an exhibition case back. I think it's a nice addition to this style of watch. It was rather difficult for me to nitpick at some of the things that I think the watch can be improved on, but one of the areas is the crown. It's rather diminutive and inset into the case. The knurling is fine. You could get a purchase on it at an angle, but it will be a difficult one to wind as it is rather small. I think that if Baltic were to just lengthen out the crown to maybe 0.2 or 0.3 millimeters, maybe less than that actually, you would be able to get a good purchase on the crown to wind it, which is something you'll be doing a lot since this is a manual wound movement. And I do think that it was a bit of a design compromise as they wanted a smaller crown to fit with the rest of that vintage dress watch design. The watch only has 30 meters of water resistance, so I would definitely not recommend swimming with it, and it does not have a screw down crown, a simple push and pull crown at that. This has been a knockout watch released by Baltic. I feel that they are the one micro brand that seems to cover every niche possible, which is really appreciated in an industry that seems to be hell-bent on moving the goalposts forward by only relying on trends. And I think that's the opposite of really moving a goalpost. Bring on more stone dials, bring on more unique watches that are not just another dive watch. I'm all for it. If you're interested in this release, act fast. There's only 200 pieces of each dial variation, and I will catch you in the next video. Thank you for watching.